So the Bayesian boat has come a cropper and ended up at the bottom of the water. Very sad story. My heart goes out to the families. What is in the name of a boat? What's in the name of a boat? The Bayesian. Well, in this video, which I'm budgeting 15 to 20 minutes recording time, which means it'll probably be closer to 30 or 40, I'm not sure, we'll see. I've got a lot that I want to talk about today. We're going to talk about what is in a name. We're going to talk about probability and statistics. We're going to have a little brain teaser as well. We're going to see, are you smarter than a first year statistics student? In fact, probably even a high school statistics student. We're going to do a test that I think really is fairly straightforward. But maybe it's too difficult. Maybe you're smarter than John the Bond. So I've got a couple of brain teasers lined up for you as well. And I'm going to share with you a couple of my ideas concerning this so-called alternative scene in which we find ourselves. So we have got a lot to talk about today. Now, you've heard the news. The Bayesian boat has sunk, and with it has gone a few people. And it's a very sad story. Sunk off the coast of Italy. Now, Dave J, don't come after me. I'm not saying that anybody died or got hurt. I'm just saying that's what the news is saying. And as you know, I like to analyze the news to see if I can notice patterns. It's one of my hobbies and interests. So don't come after me, Dave J. Now, let's take a look at this. Do you remember the name of the boat that went into the bridge in Baltimore? I've got it on your screen right there for you. It's called the Dali. Now, why was that interesting to some of us? Well, you see, there was an artist named Salvador Dali, after whom the boat was named. And this guy was some kind of surrealist painter. And some people feel like this reality that we live in, this timeline that we're in, post-2020 or post-2012, or post whatever year you think this place went nuts, we're living in some kind of absurdist, surrealist, some guy who's up on heaps of drugs, some kind of dystopian, sometimes it feels like. But then sometimes it actually feels like a pretty good place to be. I guess it depends on your mood. But this reality is very strange. And so the name of that boat was the Dali. And sometimes some of us, we see these news stories and we think, what can we take from the details that are given? Are there hints? Are there clues? Are we going completely nuts? So we've got this Bayesian boat. Now, what does Bayes or Bayesian mean to you? My dear listeners and viewers all around the world here at johnthebond.com and the John the Bond YouTube channel, in the early hours of August 22, 2024, what does Bayes or Bayesian mean to you? We'll come back and talk about that. Now, I'm sure you've heard the story that a couple of dudes have recently died. The co-defendant of the tech tycoon Mike Lynch, who is currently missing in Italy, has died after being hit by a car. Stephen Chamberlain, 52, was Mr. Lynch's co-defendant in his US fraud trial in which both men were acquitted following the $11 billion sale of the software giant Autonomy. Mr. Chamberlain died after being struck by the vehicle while out running in Cambridgeshire on Saturday, and his family has now paid tribute to him. So anyway, this is the story. There were two dudes, and they created this company called Autonomy, and they sold it to Hewlett-Packard for $8 billion or $10 billion, whatever, a lot of money. And then basically Hewlett-Packard said, hey, you guys have misled us about this company. We think you've sold us a lemon. And these guys were like, well, too bad, so sad. You already signed the dotted line. We're out of here. Vroom! And they got out of there. And then this American company said, not so fast. We've got a deal with your country, England or the UK. We've got a deal with them. We can just extradite your sorry asses back to America. And there was some to and there was some fro, but eventually this guy ended up back on a plane, or possibly a boat, I don't know. I wasn't there, but the story is he ended up back in America, and he had to go to court along with the dude who was on this boat. Now, this court case went for years and years, but eventually they were acquitted in June of this year. Both of them. So the two men who made all this money selling their autonomy company to Hewlett-Packard, after years and years of nonsense, they were told, listen, you can go. That was in June of this year. Then in the space of 2 days, this guy gets hit by a car. He's dead. And then the guy who owns this boat here, the Bayesian, this Lynch character, his boat goes down. So the two dudes who finally got away with their sale, they're free men to go. Well, it didn't work out for them. Now, why is all this interesting? Well, let's take a look at this news story. I'm just going to play you 1 minute of this clip, and I'll play it at normal speed. And I'll play it at 1.25 speed, folks, because time is of the essence. Let's just play 1 minute of this. Take a listen.
You're a detective and a very sensible man, and when you...
You know what, let's just go back to 1 speed, and if you want, you can just bump up the speed of this video, which most of you probably do already. So this is so she's saying to him, you're a detective, and they're talking about this boat tragedy. This is from just 24 hours ago. Take a look at this.
You look at the odds of being hit by a car. I mean, look at the odds of, in the early hours of the morning to some random typhoon taking out your yacht. You'd think that that's sort of, 1 in a billion that both of those things can happen at the same time. But would you say that that is what has gone on here? Your detective knows. Do you go, nothing to see here, there's not even worth looking into anything?
So she's saying, what are the odds that one guy gets hit by a car and then the other guy, so the two dudes who just got acquitted, she's saying, because I just spoke about that prior to I've already fast forwarded for you. Here's a little dish I prepared earlier. So she's saying, what are the odds of this? Is it 1 in a billion? You're a detective. Give us your opinion. Now, here's what he has to say.
When I was a mere...
Sometimes that's just how it goes.
Yes, that is sometimes how it goes. But when I was a mere pup of a detective, a very seasoned, clever detective who you really wouldn't have wanted to be nicked by, trust me. You really didn't want to get nicked by this fella. He was a brilliant detective. He turned around to me and he said, son, there's no such thing as coincidence.
Right.
Ooh, there's no such thing as coincidence. However, what? However?
You see, so now applying his rule of theory to things, you might say, well, these deaths are not coincidental, so maybe something darker lies behind it. However, as much as I loved him and as brilliant as he was, I think that rule might not apply here. I think...
Oh, this could just be a coincidence. So this old veteran detective told the young pup back in his younger days, listen, son, there's no such thing as a coincidence. However, this one probably is just a coincidence is what he's saying. Well, not so fast, folks, because I've been looking into this and I've discovered some things which have shaken me to the depths of my miserable soul. Now, I know some people come back and say, oh, JLB, it's in the news, so it must be a fake story. And to these people I say, why are you still subscribed to my channel? I'm all for auto-hoaxing as a personal philosophy, but not as a religion. And not as an epistemology. Oh, well, if it's on the news, it's definitely fake. And I've explained this many times, so if it's offending you that I'm looking at these news stories and saying, well, I don't know for certain, I wasn't there, was it real, was it fake, let's see what we can extract information-wise, data-wise. Where can the rabbit hole take us, as it were? If you're offended by me doing that, I'm not trying to offend you, just unsubscribe from my channel. This is what I do. I'm not trying to piss anybody off. So please, let's carry on with the story then. So I looked further into this and I found very little on the different conspiracy or alternative or synchromystic or predictive programming outlets. I found very little. On Twitter, on the Reddits, on the different forums, and I found very little on this so far. I'm not sure why that is. But I did find this from Days of Noah, some kind of Twitterer, so I'm following this guy now, and he was pointing out about the name of the book, and I had forgotten that remember back in the day, Bill Gates, he did that book list, and the top of his book list was How to Lie with Statistics, and of course Bayesian is a form of statistics, or it's an approach or a method or what have you. And I was like, that's a very interesting point. So I decided to look further into this character, Mike Lynch, and his relationship with Bayes' theorem, and that got me looking back into the history of the Bayes' approach in mathematics and statistics and probability. And to cut a long story short, I went into great detail about all of this and much more. What I discovered really is remarkable. So I made a member video. It's about 80 minutes long, and it's much more slick than what you're watching right now because I made that today. It took hours. And with those videos, I really set everything out and I cut it all the dead air. I try and do that for the YouTube videos as well, but obviously for the people who support johnlebon.com, they get the primo content. So if you want to know more about Bayesian mathematics and probability and where it really came from and why that's relevant to the sinking of this boat, in my personal opinion, go and check that out. I'll link to that member video. It's a member video / podcast. All my member videos, if they're more than 20 minutes long, I also upload them as an MP3. So that's available as a video or MP3 to members of johnlebon.com. Now, I'll just give you a little taste test though. So this guy, Mike Lynch, who supposedly is passed away, and my heart goes out to the family in this boat disaster, he made his billions with tech companies, including that autonomy company. Now, one of the approaches that he took was applying Bayesian statistical theory, if we can call it that, to IT, and in particular to what some people call AI, and to learning models, these kinds of, or learning machines, I should say. This modern technology that seems to be getting very... Have you guys played with any so-called AI tools lately? It's phenomenal how good they've gotten. Anyway, I found out, so this is from Mike Lynch, this is the guy who owned the Bayesian Boat, are you with me? this guy, Mike Lynch, who owned the Bayesian Boat, who was supposedly passed away in suspicious circumstances just 2 days after his partner also passed away in suspicious circumstances. He named his boat Bayesian. That's the boat at the bottom of the ocean. Well, I found this from him from April 2021, so 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago. And there's a part that stood out to me. And he said, "My first encounter with Bayes' work was an airless seminar room at Cambridge University in the mid-1980s. I was a junior research fellow within the signal processing group where we tried to understand signals, or what you might call digital pictures, sounds and speech. A visiting professor, Bill Fitzgerald, began to explain his application of Bayes' theorem to signal processing, how to find a signal under noise. Part of Fitzgerald's research was focused on finding submarines in the ocean." Finding submarines in the ocean. Well, now you're talking my language, because I happen to have a bit of an interest in these sinking ship stories, and in particular, the submarines sinking. And believe it or not, I wrote an article for johnthebond.com, which seems to have predicted the disaster known as the Titan submersible. Remember this one? This is from June last year. Now, I didn't actually predict the disaster, in my opinion. I didn't know it was going to happen. Nobody told me it was going to happen. However, if you were to read my article, which I published a couple of years prior to that disaster, there's a number of things encoded within the article that seem to predict a submarine disaster on the day that this happened. I know that's hard to believe. It was hard for me to believe. But fortunately for me, I don't believe in so-called predictive programming. And I don't believe that all of these directors and these producers are necessarily in on it. I think there's something else happening, which if you're new to my channel might sound, you're like, what are you talking about? It's predictive programming. I don't think it is. I personally don't think it is. And I talk more about that in my latest video, Bayes Watch, which I will put a link to in the comment section below. Now, the point is, so we've got this guy. Let's go back to this. Where is that boat? Show me the boat. There it is. Bayesian boat has sunk. The guy who owned the boat made a lot of money applying Bayesian theory in the field of IT, and in particular in these learning machines and AI and all this kind of stuff. Alrighty then. Let's get back on with the story. So, we've got this Mike Lynch businessman. Okay, now I know some of you are going to say, oh, JLB, these are all fake characters. Every story in the news is a fake story. It's all completely scripted. It's all completely make-believe. We're going to completely deny anything that's on the TV. It's all totally fake. Why are you paying attention? And again, I'm saying to you, why are you still subscribed to my channel? I don't understand why you would... Like, you can believe whatever you want to believe. I respect it. You know, this idea that some people legitimately just deny everything. That if it's on the TV or if it's in the news, it's definitely fake. I kind of admire that. And if that makes you happy to be that way, I'm happy for you. I'm not trying to take that away from you. So I'm being quite serious, folks. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being facetious in any way. If you're happy with this mindset that you have of, well, if it's in the news, I can just deny the whole thing, all of it, then as long as you're happy, man, it's not a problem. But I'm interested in this story, and I just find it strange that there's so few people who are covering it, given the potential synchromistic or the potential predictive programming elements involved in the story. I find it all very strange. So I was looking into this. Now, there are a number of things that I found, but the ones I want to share with you guys, let's scroll down, shall we? This is the story, okay? He was, the civil and criminal cases that he was recently acquitted from. They've got the boat incident in there. You get the whole idea. What I found interesting, let's go to this. This HP Autonomy. Okay, so this is the company that he started. There's Michael Lynch, you can see it. He founded it with a guy called David Tabazel, supposedly. So I went and looked into this guy. Now, this guy has a very strange background. So this is not the guy who was killed by the car. That was a different business partner. This is the business partner who helped him to start Autonomy. Okay, now if you look through this guy's page, you get down to this part here, and you find out that he is... Let's read this. Tabazel is the biological son of fertility pioneer, biologist, and PSI co-inventor, Bertold Weisner, and he's the half-brother of a whole bunch of different people. Now, how could that be? Well, if we look at Bertold Weisner, this is a very strange story. Bertold Weisner was an Austrian-born physiologist noted firstly for coining the term psi to denote parapsychological phenomena, and secondly for his contribution to research into human fertility and the diagnosis of pregnancy, and thirdly for being the biological father of upwards of 600 offspring by anonymously donating sperm used by his wife, the obstetrician Mary Barton, to perform artificial insemination on women at her private practice in the Harley Street of London. Boy, oh boy, this is... So this guy is the father of the dude who is partners with Mike Lynch, this guy who is the Bayesian dude, all right, who is, we are told, his body's been recovered from the boat. That's what we're told. Don't come after me, Dave J. I'm not saying it was real or fake. I'm just saying that's the story. All right, so we've got a bit sidetracked here. So this guy starts a company with some other guy. They sell it for a ton of money. Well, this actually starts with multiple people, but two of them get put on trial, and they get acquitted a couple of months ago, and they're now both dead in suspicious circumstances. One guy who wasn't put on trial was the guy who helped start the company, this David Tabazel, who happens to be the son of a very strange character. It's all rather bizarre if you ask me. Now, I went to look into more of this stuff about this Mike guy. This guy who, again, owned the Bayesian Boat and has reportedly passed away. And I found this. Find it interesting. I want to share it with you now. And just stay tuned because the brain teasers are coming. We're going to see how smart are these people. All these people who come to me and say, "Oh, JLB, haven't you figured it out yet? It's all scripted. We know the script, actually." We're going to see just how well you... Let's just see how good you are at making predictions about the future with a couple little brain teasers that are taught in introductory statistics classes. That is, introductory probability classes. I've got some brain teasers for you guys, and I didn't invent them. I'm just here to share them with you. Let's see how smart you are. Let's see how smart I am. Stay tuned for the brain teasers. Now, this is this guy, this Mike Lynch guy. And so this is from a few years ago. He also created a company called Dark Trace, the tech of the future in his own words. Now, what's the story? He says that he was on the board of the BBC, which does correlate with what is in... I think it's in here somewhere. Let's search for it. BBC. There it is. Previously been on the board of Cambridge Enterprise, Royal Botanic Gardens and Kew, the BBC, the British Library. Goodness gracious me. He was on the Royal Society Committee. This is one very interesting character. Do you really think this guy is totally fake? You think this whole story is totally fake, do you? Maybe some of you do. That's up to you. Maybe they invented the whole character yesterday. Maybe they invented the whole character 50 years ago and he was like a lifetime actor, as some people would say. People have very bizarre ideas of how the world works. It really is strange, but whatever makes them happy. Whatever makes them happy makes me happy. Yeah. So he says, I was on the board of BBC, all right, and the celebs' salaries were appearing in the tabloids. So in other words, the people who worked for the BBC, somehow there were tabloid news stories saying, oh, this person's getting paid all this money, which can be embarrassing or uncomfortable for the celebrity. How is the press getting this information? How is the BBC information getting out to the tabloids? So he says, I was on the board at that time, and the celebs' salaries were appearing in the tabloids. Because I was the only technical one on the board, they said, Mike, go and find out. Go and deal with this. I realized that it was the insiders. It was the insiders doing it. It was the people that were actually employed by the BBC. Back then, the only thing people ever thought about cybersecurity was build this massive great wall around everything and keep everyone out. They forgot that they let everyone in the morning. So I started thinking, there's got to be a different approach here because you've got to assume the attackers are in. I remember the New York Times got hacked. I just remember hearing an interview and someone said, yeah, well, we're never going to get them out now that they're that far in. And so he goes on to explain how when he was working at the BBC, he was involved in cybersecurity, and I guess he must have had access to a lot of private information at that level. And based on his CV's his backstory, it does seem like this was a very important guy in the fields, well, in multiple fields, but particularly in the information technology fields and in the media, in science. This is one very important dude. This guy who owned the boat that sunk, the Bayesian boat, the Sinky boat. Very important dude, apparently. Now, I also found this. Since January 2007, now this is a much older article. Let's scroll up here. Mike Lynch, the man behind Autonomy. This is from 2012. This is 12 years ago, but because what he had to do was he had to quit the board. He had to resign from multiple posts once he got charged with the crimes in America. Which, that's just how the world works. So it says here, since January 2007, he's been on the BBC Executives Board, which has been ditching members with alacrity. Oh, that's a nice word. Since June 2011, he's also been one of the members of David Cameron's Council for Science and Technology. So he's effectively a member of the government or an advisor of the government. As well as being festooned with awards from Cambridge University and magazines. To those of you who started off this video saying, JLB is a fake character, are you sticking with that? Like, that's how you started off, fair enough. But now that you've heard more about this guy, are you starting to think it's possible that maybe he really did exist? Maybe not in the capacity we're led to believe. Maybe there's more to the story, but if you started off this video thinking he was a fake character, are you starting to change your mind? You see, in the Bayesian approach to statistics, that's the whole idea. You can start off with a hypothesis or a theory, and you can assign it a value, a probability value in your mind if you like, but as more information comes to hand, you change the values that you assign to the probabilities. And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of Bayesian theorem here. I'm not even an expert on it. I just know a little bit about it because I've studied a little bit of statistics in the day. The point is, a sensible approach, I would say, and the Bayesians would say, is to change your mind as new evidence comes in and be happy to do that. Now, are you guys happy to do that? Is anybody watching this video happy to do that? Or do you basically just go through your day from moment to moment, just your mind stays the same? Just stays the same, just, whatever. Or maybe you don't even have opinions. Like maybe you don't even have opinions at all. You just want to disagree with this guy and agree with that guy just based on how you feel about it. Like I'm asking you a question, it's a very important question. Yes, you listening to me right now on the John LeBon channel. How do you actually think? I'm not asking do you think. I'm not asking what do you think. I'm asking how do you think? Do you think about your own thinking? Have you ever sat down and thought to yourself, why do I believe this about this event? Have I revisited my methodology for arriving at opinions? This is a serious question. I want your opinions in the comment section below, and stay tuned for the mind bender, for the quiz that's coming up. Yes, we're going to do a little brain bending exercise, a little brain teaser as they call them, a very simple one, a very straightforward one. We'll see how many of you guys get the correct answer. We'll see. I'm guessing like 20%, and half of that will just be from lucky guesses. I really believe that. Most of the people who subscribe to my channel these days are either hate viewers or they're people who don't hate me, but they just to pass the time. They watch me to pass the time. They watch my stuff to feel smarter. Somehow watching me makes them feel smarter, even though they're just listening to me, they're not doing their own work. There's only a small proportion of the people who watch me these days who I think are actually trying to learn. Now, I'm talking about the general group here. You as an individual, I don't know what you're here for, and it's not really my business, it's your business. You're watching, hopefully you're enjoying, that's the most important thing, but how many people are really here trying to improve themselves, folks? Honestly, seriously? The average person is spending 5 hours a day on their smartphone. 5 hours a day on their smartphone, and even more behind tablets and laptops and desktop computers and Netflix on the TV. It's really remarkable how much time people are spending on stuff. But everybody's too busy to read a book or to learn about statistics or to just write some stuff down and then ask themselves, can I come back to this in 6 months and will I have the same opinions? People just aren't doing it. It's phenomenal. I'm starting to wonder, folks, this whole NPC idea, it's really... Oh boy. Anyway, so this Lynch dude, if he existed, with a PhD in mathematical computing, Ireland-born, he was Lynch's first company in the 1980s made audio sampling systems for the music recording industry. Then he went to Cambridge Neurodynamics, fingerprint recognition, oh I see. Autonomy shot him to tech stardom. Its key breakthrough was applying the idea of Bayes' theorem, a method of figuring out what data is telling you as it accrues into the processing of huge amounts of text. And it just goes on and on like that. So they sold the company to Hewlett-Packard, and as you know, they got sued but eventually won the case. Now, if I had more time, how much time have we got left? We're already 23 minutes in. I wanted to play for you just a couple of minutes of this dude explaining Bayes' theorem. And it looks really complex because of the notation. If you haven't studied much mathematics or statistics, it looks complicated, but it really is not that complicated. It's basically just looking at, if you know one thing about something, what's the likelihood of another thing being the case? And this is very useful in areas like machine learning and AI and trying to make predictions. It's really useful for that. And that's one of the reasons why this guy made so much money, according to the story. So what I wanted to do was just say, guys, you might find this interesting, because what statistics is really trying to do at its fundamental core is to try and make sense of the world around us. To try and make sense of what is the chance that did happen, what is the chance that things are as they are, what are the chances that things are going to happen. It's really just a method for assessing the world in which we live, which really, isn't that what you're trying to do? Isn't that what you at least tell yourself you're trying to do? You're trying to make sense of the world. So you see a news story, maybe you're thinking to yourself, what are the chances that's real? Maybe you're not asking yourself that. Maybe you just have already decided that's definitely fake. Or maybe you're one of the complete normies who, well, if it's on the TV, it must be real. So maybe you're one of those people on the far edges who are too far gone. But most people say, well, actually, no, I do like to assess. I like to assess each thing on its own merits. Okay, cool. So if you're doing that, you're trying to make sense of stuff. The information that comes to you. Someone tells you a story when you're at work. Somebody tells you a story on the television. Somebody tells you a story over the phone. You go out to the bar and some dude tells you a story. You go out to the bar and some girl tells you a story, right? Or you go to a friend's barbecue and you see an old friend of a friend, he tells you a story, right? Or there's everyone telling the same story. Ooh, there's an ooga booga on the loose, whatever. You're getting all these stories coming at you. You are getting so many stories. I'm getting so many stories coming at me. And whether we realize it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not, we are assessing those stories, oftentimes with heuristics, with presumptions and assumptions. So I wanted to play for you some minutes of this Bayes' theorem thing, but instead I'll just link to that in the comment section below if you want to go and learn more about it. And you might not think you're ever going to need to apply Bayes' theorem. I don't work in machine learning. I don't learn. No, that's okay. It's just looking at the different ways of assessing information is good for us to think about our own thinking. And that's what I'm trying to encourage you to do. That's how I got into all of this in the first place, was to check my own thinking, to share what I'd found when I checked my thinking, and then to help other people check their thinking. That was the idea. And maybe some of you are still interested in getting better. Maybe. I doubt it though, with all the distractions and the vape pens and goodness gracious me. So anyway, this guy, this blue and brown guy, he makes reference to some previous studies that were done that made reference to Bayes' theorem and probability and these kinds of things. So I went and tracked them down to read them, because I hadn't actually read the original studies before, as far as I can remember. Let me just read this to you. So this is from one of the studies. This is from like 1973. This is from Kahneman and Tversky on the psychology of prediction. That's what they're really looking at, is the psychology of prediction. What assumptions do we have when we make predictions? So this guy says, regression effects, that is kind of like regression to the mean or reversion to the mean, are all about us. In our experience, most outstanding fathers have somewhat disappointing sons. Brilliant wives have duller husbands. The ill-adjusted tend to adjust, and the fortunate are eventually stricken by ill luck. In spite of these encounters, people do not acquire a proper notion of regression. First, they do not expect regression in many situations where it is bound to occur. Second, as any teacher of statistics will attest, a proper notion of regression is extremely difficult to acquire. Third, when people observe regression, they typically invent spurious dynamic explanations. So this is, even though it's called statistics, this is really psychology. This is looking at how do we think and why do we think that way. So with all of that said, I want to show you something. Now it's time for our brain teaser. So on your screen here, you can see, and I'm going to read this out for you. This is a hypothetical. Let's see how many of you guys get this right. A certain town is served by 2 hospitals. In the large, so we're looking at the middle of the screen, by the way, folks. This is the middle of the screen. In the larger hospital, about 45 babies are born each day. And in the smaller hospital, about 15 babies are born each day, roughly. As you know, about 50% of all babies are boys, roughly. However, the exact percentage varies from day to day. Sometimes it may be higher than 50% are boys. Sometimes it may be lower than 50%. But overall, it's about 50% of each. Now, for a period of 1 year, each of these 2 hospitals recorded the days on which more than 60% of the babies born were boys. Which hospital do you think recorded more such days? So remember, one of these hospitals has about, on average, 45 babies are born there each day. On average. The other one has 15 babies born each day. So the bigger hospital has 3 times as many babies born each day on average. And what they wanted to track was on how many days are 60% of the babies born at either hospital boys. So on how many days does big hospital have 60% or more boys? On how many days does little hospital have 60% or more boys? Okay, now, what is your answer? Is your answer that the larger hospital has more days of 60% or above boys? Or is your answer that the smaller hospital has 6% or above boys? Or is your answer that it's about the same, within about 5% of each other? Now, these other numbers in the parentheses, you can just ignore those because they're not directly relevant to the question. That's a different thing from this is a much larger study and a much larger paper. But my question for you is, based on the hypothetical, what is your answer? Which of those 2 hospitals is likely to have more boys born, 60% or more? Let me know in the comment section below. What do you think? Let's find out. And this is a very simple brain teaser, folks, but maybe it's not so simple. And I was enjoying today. I spent several hours today reading back through older statistics stuff that I should know because I studied it. Other statistics stuff that I hadn't actually studied that I can remember anyway when I was at university. It was really enjoyable for me to actually check my own thinking. And I actually got a few brain teasers wrong and I was like, hold on, All right, if I got that wrong, let me sit here with a pen and paper and sort of go back through my logic here, how to get that wrong, and then you find out what the real answer is. You're like, oh, of course, why didn't I factor that in? What was I thinking? I really enjoyed the process. Hopefully you enjoy the process too, because chances are you're going to get this question wrong. More than 60% of babies born are boys. Which of those hospitals is going to have more days of those days? The bigger one or the smaller one? The 45 babies a day on average or the 15? Let me know in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about this presentation. If you like my material, by the way, you want to go and join the free JLB mailing list. Sometimes I email out my member videos to people for free if they're on the mailing list. Sometimes I do that. And also, if you find any of this Bayesian stuff interesting, the Bayes Boat, if you find this interesting, go and check out Bayes Watch. This is an 80-minute video audio presentation which goes into way more detail about the synchronicities surrounding this boat event and the other guy in the car getting hit. And who are these people? Where do these stories come from? And what the hell is going on in this world? It goes into a lot more detail. So that's available to members of johnlebon.com, the people who support this and make all of this possible. But for everybody else, make sure you're on the free mailing list. And I'll put links to everything in the comment section below. And let me know, folks, how'd you go with the brain teaser? How'd you go with this? Let's find out. Okay, everybody, bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
He turned round to me and he said, son, there's no such thing as coincidence.